Hello and welcome to the Mobalytics patch 11.22 tier list. Once again, I'm Dan Aux Harrison. Not a ton of changes on this patch, and a lot are addressed to champions that are more prevalent at higher ranks, and as a result you'll see champions being nerfed who aren't even good enough for Low Elo to show up on our list. We'll still be breaking things down, but we'll focus a lot on which champs have been excelling at the lower ranks. So first off, top lane, in the God tier we have Tahm Kench, Teemo and Garen. In the S tier we have Dr. Mundo, Graves, Lilia, Malphite, Mordekaiser, Nasa, Set, Urgot, Wukong and Yorick. Goldrinker got a solid buff, 50 extra health and 2% more Omnivamp. These changes are a solid boost to a champion's survivability and sustain and will be massively appreciated, but likely won't be enough to mitigate the loss of the spike passive we saw earlier on. Renekton had his stun changes reverted, and with the Goldrinker buff he's definitely looking better, but even when he was a staple in pro play and High-ELO he was underwhelming at lower ranks, so he's not secured himself a good spot on this list. Graves had a nerf to the crit damage on his autos, but he's been exceptional on top lane, so although this will definitely tone him down, he'll still be a viable pick and his laning phase will be mostly unaffected. Set has been a really solid performer in solo queue, and even with Goldrinker being nerfed, he still held up pretty solidly. With the big buffs coming in, he's in a prime spot to be carrying games and dictating how teamfights play out. His laning is solid and he's really potent in skirmishes, with his CC combined with his W allowing him to turn things around with a huge shield and a ton of damage. In teamfights, a big factor is getting range to ultimate. With your flash available, you can easily set up engages, even more so if you find a flank. Now I know what you're thinking, Riven in a low elo list? Yeah, well, she's definitely a champion with a high skill cap and I don't recommend beginners to pick her up, but I also do know a lot of lower elo players do still play Riven and she's getting massive buffs in the current patch. First and foremost, we have the Goldrinker buffs which really benefit her. More HP and more Omnivamp will allow her to teamfight easier and duel better. On top of that, she's getting extra base damage on her W and a solid buff to the AD ratio on her shield. These changes combined with the Goldrinker increases her survivability pretty substantially, while also adding a touch of extra damage for all in. Definitely changes which would be appreciated. Garen is the go-to lane stomper at lower ranks. High damage with a simple kit, pretty solid snowball potential. A lot of lanes will simply get stat checked by Garen, and his silence to spin combo leaves limited counterplay. On top of that, once your ultimate is available, you can easily 100-0 a squishy target if you can get on top of them. Stride Breaker really helps to keep a target close once you've silenced them, and Mortal Reminder is actually a really solid follow-up item. It might surprise you, but it's a mix of attack speed, crit and AD, which just makes your spin really hit hard. Onto the jungle, in the God tier we have Echo, Trundle and Amumu, and in the S tier we have Evelynn, Fiddlesticks, Graves, Master Yi, Nocturne, Rammus, Shaco, Vi, Warwick, Xin Zhao and Zac. We already mentioned this in top, but the Goldrinker buffs were substantial and a lot of the champs utilising it will appreciate these changes and look better as a result. Graves had his crit damage and his autos toned down, but often jungle Graves would rush Ghostblade, and by the time this nerf takes impact you'll have already had a substantial impact on the game, so it won't move him down from his current tier. Kha'Zix got a pretty solid nerf to his Q damage. Honestly, the isolated damage was so obscene that he won't suffer too much on that end, but the non-isolated damage nerf does hit him a decent amount. That being said, he'll appreciate the Goldrinker buff, so he'll still manage to adapt through these changes. Xin Zhao suffered a fair bit with Goldrinker being nerfed, but with the buffs coming in on this patch, he's in a really good position. His early ganks and skirmishes are absolutely excellent, and the extra health and Omnivamp will help him fight for longer in his first item. If you're looking to impact a game early, challenge the enemy jungler over scuttles and be proactive, then Xin Zhao is an excellent pickup. He also holds up pretty solidly in the later stages of the game, thanks to his ult allowing him to really effectively zone range carries while soaking damage. Kayn got twofold buffs on this patch. Firstly, he benefits pretty substantially from the Goldrinker buffs. Omnivamp is excellent for him, as is the extra HP. Secondly, he received buffs to his Rast form. Firstly, he gained extra percentage HP damage in his Q, and his ultimate has a higher max HP ratio. Both of these changes will help him shed bulkier targets, and with Goldrinker being buffed and bruises being still so potent, this is excellent to help him thrive in close range melee fights. Kayn definitely can still struggle in the early game to get rolling, but once he gets his form and Goldrinker completed, he can start to pop off. Viego ended up in a decent spot after the range buffs he had on 11.21. He's not quite at his godlike status he had earlier in the season, but he's pretty powerful, and on top of that he's a great utilizer of Divine Sundra, which went essentially untouched for the past few patches. Viego is incredibly strong in skirmishes, and essentially if you get a single kill for a reset, you'll be able to snowball very effectively. This is even more relevant once you hit 6, as even if you kill a lower value target, the ultimate reset power will allow you to chain together more kills and start to take over. Onto the mid lane, in the God tier we have Vex, Akshan and Fizz, and in the S tier we have Annie, Graves, Kayle, Lux, Malzahar, Yasuo. Mid lane's got a pretty solid buff to Akali, but she's still a pretty underwhelming pick at lower ranks, so despite this being a solid increase, it's still not the best option to pick up due to her high burden of execution. Kiana got substantial nerfs, but was already a weak low elo pick, but after this she absolutely should not be played up lower ranks. Graves got a nerf to his crit damage and auto is definitely a hit and enough to push him out of God tier, but he's been so strong recently that he's likely still going to hold up well. Singed has popped up in the mid lane as a really powerful roaming pick. Predator allows you to frequently move to side lanes and run down targets to flip them backwards. Most lane opponents will struggle to escape you, and once you complete your Rylai's, you become really frustrating to deal with, and even mobile targets likely won't have enough dashes to get away from you. Since he's a unique champion and definitely one that takes some getting used to, but his play pattern in the mid lane is pretty simple. Use your Q to clear the wave, roam to a side lane, and find a target to flip backwards and allow your teammates to kill. And then just look to rinse and repeat, and when it comes to teamfights you can cause a huge amount of disruption and become a difficult target to take down when you're fed. Veigar is another Predator abuser. With Ingenious allowing the cooldown to be ridiculously low, you can frequently play around the movement speed boost to set up your cage for picks. Unless you're facing into a champion with a blink like Ezreal, most targets will be stuck within your cage unless they have a flash available. This pick potential is a great tool to play around, and it allows easy and straightforward gameplay to carry your solo queue games. Veigar scales incredibly well thanks to the control he offers with the cage, combined with his free AP passive that allows him to one-shot opponents in the late game. Vex has been popping off since she was released. His skirmishing is really potent thanks to a passive fear combined with a good level of burst damage, which you can use to reset on the back of her ultimate. When looking to fight, leading with your ult from a large distance allows you to dash in and pop an AoE fear with your W. When fed, this is enough to 100-0 a target, but your Q and E are great follow-up if you need them. After that, you can wait for your cooldowns to be available again before firing off your ultimate once more and taking down another target. Vex is incredibly frustrating to deal with when ahead, and she finishes his first two items, you can easily destroy squishy targets. Onto the bot lane. In the God tier we have Misfortune and Vayne, and the S tier we have Ashe, Draven, Jhin, Sivir, Swain and Ziggs. AD saw buffs to Kalista and Varus, but both are suboptimal low elo solo queue picks. Kalista got more damage on a rend, which is definitely solid, and Varus got a big boost in his EAD ratio. With the nerfs saw to his lethality build, it won't do too much to bring him back as the E range is far shorter compared to his Q. Xayah has flown up in priority since the changes in 11.21. The Q changes have resulted in people maxing her Q and rushing Essence Reaver as a first item. It allows you to play around comboing your Q and E for longer range poke. Essence Reaver means if you do combo Q auto E, you'll have a ton of burst, but you'll also have essentially infinite mana thanks to the mana restorer mechanic. Xayah has been performing super well on the back of this and does great at dealing with some of the more powerful melee bruisers in the meta, as once her feathers are stacked, she massacres them. There's a new build for Ezreal which has been popping off recently. It relies on the recently buffed Ingenious Hunter rune as a secondary. The way it works is by reducing the cooldown of items, it actually allows you to stack your tier faster. So by starting tier you can have it fully stacked at around 12 minutes, and by rushing Manamune you can have a massive spike early into the game. Another factor with Ingenious Hunter is it reduces the cooldown of Sheen or Sheen items. When your Divine Sunder is completed, you'll be able to activate it on every single Mystic shot and significantly increase your damage output. It's easy to overlook the impact of Ingenious Hunter when it comes to non-activated items, and builds like this are a great example of how it can be utilized. Finally, onto support. God tier we have Blitzcrank, Nami and Soraka, and S tier we have Amumu, Leona, Lux, Morgana, Sona, Zillion and Zyra. Yumi got nerfs. So happy to see this, as she was the highest ban rate champion on the patch and was really frustrating to play against, as it was essentially shut her down or lose the game. Her E, heal and movement speed ratio was toned down, and as a result she will suffer a fair amount. She was on the upper end of A tier, but with this nerf, she's a bit more on the lower end, but still capable of holding in that tier. Maokai also got nerfed to his passive heal and W damage, which definitely makes his role as a support more difficult. His ability to shrug off poke and reliably lock down a target was his big strength. Lux got some substantial buffs on 11.21, which resulted in her being significantly stronger in the support role. Lux has really low counterplay when it comes to her poke, it's very difficult to dodge her E, and as a result you can lay down substantial harass in the laning phase. The recent buffs gave even more damage to her E, and it's a great way to help control the wave on top of layering down damage. The one weakness of Lux support is if you miss your Q, it potentially puts you in a vulnerable position, but it's very risky for the opposing bot laners. If they get caught by it, you'll easily be able to follow up with damage. Lux's ult is only 60-second cooldown at level 6, which means if you do find a 2v2 all-in, it'll be available again once both bot lanes have reset and got back to lane, allowing you to consistently offer threat and kill pressure. Soraka is really strong at the moment, and with Gordrinker being buffed, he's great at synergizing with bulky bruisers, which can essentially turn immortal. Soraka becomes a significant problem for the enemy team, as in any situation where she survives, she can continue to provide humongous value. Moonstone gives massive value, not just the healing from the item itself, but the 35% healing and shielding boost provided when in combat ends up offering a huge amount of power over the course of a game. Soraka actually does pose a decent amount of threat in the laning phase with harass, and her silence shuts down engages against her. On top of that, a lot of bot lanes will see Soraka as an easy target, but as long as you hit your Q, the self-sustain makes you a trickier champ to take down. Janet is a really powerful pick at dealing with engaged threat and melee threat. Her Q and R can interrupt dashes to stop opponents getting on top of a carry, and this works fantastically against champions like Leona, Alistar and Rakan. On top of that, the free passive movement speed she gains means you can easily roam around the map and join in on skirmishes and fights to turn the tides towards a team. Janet is generally a solid pick in most situations, but I'd say she's best picked when a lot of opponents are looking to dive in and are reliant on dashes. For me personally, I will pick her whenever I see the enemy team take Zac, as it massively shuts down his entire kit and allows your AD carry to have a much better time. And that's it for this patch. Hopefully this has been helpful in getting you up to speed on the meta. If you're interested in seeing the full Low Elo and High-ELO list in one place, including seeing D tiers, then head on over to mobalytics.gg where you can get even more info including counters, builds, tips, combos and more. See you next time and thanks for watching.